This is the best.
Do you hear me?
Of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
It is a great pleasure and honor for me to welcome David Israel to our program. I last spoke to him many, many years ago when he was covering the demise of another Notre Dame coach from his perch at the Chicago Tribune. But today, certainly a very sad occasion. David, very accomplished writer and producer. It's a pleasure to welcome you to our program. Good afternoon.
Well, thanks very much, Paul. Sorry for the reason I'm with you, but I'm glad to be with you.
Well, certainly you know that terrain, not only growing up as a sports fan, but going to school in the city of Chicago where Ara Parseghian was so well known and revered from his days at Northwestern and, of course, at Notre Dame. And I think you made a point to me earlier. You just can't look at him as one of the great college football coaches. He was so much more than that.
He was. He lived a truly meaningful life. He was a young. I mean, he accomplished his goals in football. He played college football. He left college to serve in the Navy during World War II. He then returned to college and played for the great Sid Gilman, who was one of the two great influences on him at Miami of Ohio. And the other great influence on him was Paul Brown, for whom he played both at the Great Lakes Naval Base during World War II, where Paul was coaching the service team, and with the Cleveland Browns. He played in the same backfield as, believe it or not, Otto Graham, who's probably also the greatest player in Northwestern history, and Marion Motley, who was one of the first truly great fullbacks, and probably the first great African American player in professional football history. And he got hurt, and his pro football career was cut short, and he went into coaching. And before he was 30, he was the head coach at Miami of Ohio, where he succeeded Woody Hayes. And then Ara went from Miami to Northwestern. By the way, I'm not old enough to have covered him when he was in Northwestern. I wasn't even a student there. I started at Northwestern when Ara was at Notre Dame, but I grew up in New York and New Jersey. And, my father, who grew up in Brooklyn, who just died at 98 in March, so he's very much of the same era as Parseghian, by the way, which he would have corrected you. It's not Parseghian, it's Parseghian. I got corrected more than once. Anyway, Ara, I started covering him when I graduated from Northwestern in 73. But I was a fan of Notre Dame because when you grow up in New York and New Jersey, where there really wasn't, especially back then, there wasn't very good college football. You had Columbia and Rutgers and Fordham that already folded up despite the success of Lombardi and the 7 blocks of granite. Every good Catholic and every good Jewish kid grows up being a member of the Notre Dame Subway alumni. So I was a Notre Dame fan growing up. And back then when you could only get 1 or 2 football games a week on television, college football games, it was Notre Dame almost every week. And when I first started watching, they were not very good. It was the Terry Brennan, Q Harrick era, Huey DeVore that followed Frank Leahy's greatness. And then in '64, Ara left Northwestern and turned a defensive back, John Ewart, into a quarterback, and a team that had barely won a couple of games a year for close to a decade, had a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and went 9-1 in his first year. And then he went on to coach 11 more years, had a phenomenal winning percentage, and won 2 national championships. And from my way of thinking, in his era during those years, coaching from the 50s through the 60s, maybe or the late 40s through the 60s, there were maybe 7 or 8 coaches who belong on a pinnacle way above everybody else, college football coaches. And the first 3 are Ara Parseghian, Paul Bryant, and Eddie Robinson. And then the next echelon, just below them, are Bo Schembechler and John McKay and Darrell Royal and Woody Hayes. Then there are lots of other good coaches, but if you're going to do a Mount Rushmore, you would probably just use 3 heads, and it would be Parseghian, Bryant, and Robinson. And so as a 22-year-old, covering him and also covering Coach Bryant, because their games against Alabama were a big deal, and I always made it my business to try to go to good games. And for some reason, I can't remember the name of the SID at Alabama back then, but he was a wonderful little guy. And he introduced me to Coach Bryant, who seemed to want to talk to me, and I got to sit in his office a few times and listen to him.
I'm guessing it was Charlie Thornton, but
it was Charlie Thornton. Okay, exactly.
Yeah,
and his office, I think, was in the basketball gym.
Yeah, that is correct.
In the basement, and I remember it had cinder block walls. I'm going, what's Bear Bryant doing in his office?
No, you're. I'm dating myself, but I covered the end of Bryant. But nowadays I talk like I covered the beginning. But David, I'm so fascinated by so many things that you've said. And I know young people miss the greatest moments of Notre Dame football. Certainly with Rockne and Leahy, and certainly Ara. But yeah, this wasn't. It wasn't so that this was incredible. I thought, and you referred to it, that he brought Notre Dame back. I mean, this program had slipped.
Leahy left for a couple of years and then came back and sort of helped it in the post-war period. And then when he left again, it declined precipitously. And at the time, I know you're in Alabama, but people in the South don't realize how dominant Northern football was then, especially in college, because of segregation. The SEC and the Southwest Conference were the two dominant conferences in the South, but they couldn't hold a candle to the Big Ten and to the Pac-8 because and to some of the independents like Penn State and Notre Dame and Pitt, because they had no black players. And Duffy Daugherty, who coached the Michigan State team, was a wonderful little guy, and was the coach against Aaron, that famous 10-10 tie. If you look at his team, it's his best. Most of his great players were black players from the South. The Smith brothers, George Webster. I think Jimmy Ray's quarterback was from the South. I'm not positive. He even had a running back, Bobby Apiza, from Hawaii. And Ara had Notre Dame had, was where all the good Catholic boys went to play football, especially from the mill towns and the cities. But Ara had, the first, I think, fully integrated Notre Dame teams. And he had All-Americans like Alan Page, who to me is one of the great models of what an American should be. He played at Notre Dame, was an All-American. He was the best defensive player in the NFL, maybe ever, certainly in the top 10. Was the first defensive lineman to win the NFL MVP. Got a law degree while he was playing for the Bears and for the Vikings and the Bears, and then went on to become, for 20 years, a state Supreme Court justice in Minnesota. And he's just a phenomenally interesting human being, and he played 4 years for Ara at Notre Dame, or 3 years back then, because you couldn't play as a freshman. And he came from Northern Ohio, as Ara did. And Ara also started the first black quarterback in Notre Dame history, Cliff Brown. And he had some great quarterbacks. Cliff wasn't one of them, but he did start. But Ara had Ewart, who won the Heisman Trophy, and then had Terry Hanratty for 3 years, and then had Theismann for 3 years, and then had Tom Clements for 3 years.
Oh yeah,
that's a succession of All-Americans playing quarterback for almost his entire tenure at Notre Dame. And he developed very good wide receivers, Jack Snow, a guy named Paul Seymour, with Hanratty, they beat Purdue. I don't know if you remember this, in probably 66 maybe. They beat Purdue in a nationally televised game. Purdue had a great team. It was Bob Griese's Purdue team. And I think it was Bob Griese. And they beat Purdue on national television with Chris Schenkel calling the game. And the next week they were on the Hanratty and Seymour were on the cover of Time magazine. I've never forgotten that.
Oh my goodness!
As sophomores, because they were Notre Dame football players. That's the hold that Notre Dame had on the American sporting consciousness. And once Ara left, I think the mystique went with him because Dan Devine was many things, but he had no mystique, and he wasn't a very nice guy. And he very quickly made Notre Dame just another football program, and it stayed that way for a while. And then Holtz kind of revivified it, and ever since Lou retired, it's just been another pretty good football team. You know, Bob Davie and Charlie Weiss and Willingham and I can't even remember the name of the coach now.
Well, yeah, George O'Leary was there for a couple of weeks.
They have to have an Irish guy coaching the Irish. So
you're so correct. Finally, David, because his career, and I've never understood. Maybe you can explain as we wind up. He retired, I believe, after the '74 season, beating Alabama again, back-to-back years.
Beat him 2 years in a row in bowl games.
And then then for years there was speculation he would come back, and he never did.
No, football. He always understood football was a game. He always understood that his players should be students first, and almost all of them graduated. He had a phenomenal graduation rate. But the game consumed him. And I think it made him. I mean, he tried to explain. I mean, I was 23, 24 at the time. Actually, he gave me the story that he was going to retire, and I was too much of a knucklehead to write it. And then he called me up after the announcement, or he pulled me aside actually after the announcement. So why didn't you write the story? I told you. I said, well, I didn't know if you wanted. You know, I just didn't get it. I was too young to understand it. And you know, what he was telling me is it was just eating him up inside. It was just the physical demands on him. We're going to kill him, and he knew that. So he was 51. He was healthy. I think he'd been a head coach for close to 20 years. He wasn't going to do any better than than he was doing. I mean, you know, once you've coached 11 years, you've won 2 national championships, you've competed or been close to probably 5 others. You're at the pinnacle. What more can you do? And you know, it wasn't. And coaches didn't make the kind of money they made now. And you know, and he'd gotten lucky in some business deals. I know he was somehow involved with Marco Island, with the development of Marco Island in Florida, because I think they were named the Mack brothers, were Notre Dame alums, and they invited him into the deal. You know, so he had some money, but he also was dedicated to other things. I mean, he spent the second half of his life raising money for very good medical causes, his multiple sclerosis and another very obscure disease that killed 3 of his grandchildren. And he was dedicated to that. So he had a really meaningful life trying to raise the money to cure those diseases because they personally had affected his family. His daughter had multiple sclerosis, Karen, and his son Michael's children, I think it was called Niemann-Pick's disease, which is a very rare malady, and very, very few children suffer from it, but when they get it, it's fatal, and I think they're born with it. It's genetic. And there's very little research that before Ara, there was very little research into curing the disease because so few children are afflicted with it. So that's what I meant by saying he lived a meaningful life. I mean, he really dedicated himself to doing good work after he quit being a football coach and using his name and reputation for good causes. I have nothing but respect for him and a few regrets, like not being right enough to write that story.
Well, David, that was one of the few mistakes you made. Listen, I can't thank you enough. I'm just a couple of years younger than you, but when I started in this business, you were a guy that I studied and mimicked and wanted to be like. And, of course, then you went off to Hollywood and left us all behind. But thank you so very much for coming on.
Thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure. I love watching your show, and I still have a great affinity for Alabama football for some reason. And if there were actually a fourth face on the Mount Rushmore of college football coaches, I'd argue that Nick Saban should be the fourth.
Yeah,
face.
You made a couple of friends that you lost in Alabama a minute ago. David, we will love to talk again sometime. Thank you so very much.
Thanks very much.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
We are getting your reaction to the deaths of both Ara Parseghian and, of course, John Reeves, the former quarterback at Florida. And we will also get your phone calls at 855-242-7285. Later in the program, we will talk to Matt Luke. He is the interim head coach. It was 2 weeks ago today. Hugh Freeze was still the head coach, and Matt Luke was one of his top assistants. And today things have certainly changed dramatically. Let's bring in Jerry DiNardo, who former Notre Dame player. He's also coached 2 different spots in the SEC at Vanderbilt and LSU, and now he's a Big Ten Network analyst. Coach, always great to catch up, and I've heard some of your tales about playing for Coach Parseghian, but we'll start by just your thoughts today on his death.
Well, he's a great influence on me, and I think, everyone that played for him, and, we hear this all the time about the great coaches, and Ara certainly was a great coach, and, he lived a long time, Paul, 94 years old. He had a great career. He had some family tragedies with some health issues, but just a great person, and, my best goes out to his family.
You played on one of his most famous teams. Certainly in the South, it's remembered as his most famous team, the 2 teams that played Alabama, including Coach's final game. But the one that most people still talk about and still don't like to hear people talk about, you've lived in the South, including Alabama, is the 73 Sugar Bowl. Take us into that game, and what was it like being on the sidelines with Coach Parseghian?
Yeah, the uniqueness was, as you know, the winner was going to be the national champion, which, hadn't happened. It hadn't happened that often. And so we knew that whoever won the game was the national champion. You had Bear and you had Ara, 2 great coaches. I think 2 really good, talented teams. We had Casper and Tom Clements and Mike Fanning. We had some really good guys that could play, and Alabama was loaded. Paul, really, with my background, it was my first exposure to SEC fans, specifically Alabama fans. And it was something that, I had never seen before. We were all in the French Quarter. We shared hotels and those type of things with fans. But it was just a great game. Our motivation pitch was, what Ara explained to us, think of how many people have played college football and how few could ever say they won a national championship. And that was certainly a motivator on our sidelines, and I'm sure it was on Alabama's.
And then the next year it happened again, and I don't remember at what point, maybe you do, you were on his team, of course, and a star player, but when did you learn that the coach was stepping down? Was it before the game? Was it after the game, the Orange Bowl game against Alabama?
It was. We had broke for Christmas. We all were home, and we hadn't flown into Miami yet, and we heard it on the radio. I mean, and it just broke. And, of course, the legend is that Dan Devine's people broke it and so on and so forth. So, I was a senior. It was my last game there. And, I was surprised, but I was happy that I wasn't going to have to go through a coaching change, whereas the younger guys in the team were concerned about the coaching change, as all young players are. But that motivation, different than the year before, because I think Alabama was number 1 at the time. We were ranked lower. It wasn't 2 equal teams playing. They were better than we were. But our motivation was, we were going to make sure, we were going to try to make sure that Ara went out as a winner, and we win 13-11. So we won by 1 point one year and 2 points the next year.
And as much as we talk about Nick Saban trying to catch Bear Bryant, Notre Dame has made it a little bit easier for Saban. I'll say that because actually, in fairness, even though Notre Dame won in '73, Alabama still claimed that national championship, but certainly they didn't get the one in '74.
Well, '73, as you remember, the AP didn't vote after the bowl game. So the AP, right. Alabama was ranked number 1 in their last poll. The UPI, which was the coaches poll, did vote after, and MacArthur Bowl was awarded as well in '73. But Bear in '73, Bear came in the locker room. I mean, it was an incredible event. And the other crazy thing about those 2 games was the Orange Bowl at that time was the only one that had the team banquet after the game. So Sly Kroom was married. I was married. We wound up having dinner at the award ceremony after the game. The next night, I think, at Indian Creek Country Club, if I remember correctly. So again, my exposure to Alabama football came as a junior and a senior in college, and then obviously I learned more as I went on.
Coach, it's been a long time, and certainly Notre Dame has had its moments. Lou Holtz won a national championship, came pretty close to a few more. Brian Kelly played for a national championship, but some wonder, we had a guest on earlier who felt on one level some of the magic, maybe the mystique is the better word, went out of Notre Dame after Ara's era. Your thoughts, having played there, been a part of national championships, and certainly been a coach and competed on that level and on that stage, and being in that part of the country, now being an analyst?
Paul, I think at some point there were some advantages because Notre Dame was on TV more than everybody else because of NCAA rules. And then when the rules changed, because they had their replay on Sunday mornings, then when the rules changed, that leveled that playing field. I maintain this. I maintain as long as Notre Dame, being an independent, has access first to the BCS and now to the college football playoffs, they can win a national championship. I think the only thing, even though the world has changed and a lot of things are different now about Notre Dame, as it is different about all schools in the environment we're in, the only thing that would prevent a place like Notre Dame winning a national championship is because if they would be penalized for not being part of a conference and not have access to the national championship. So until that happens, I think they definitely can win it. Now, Brian played for it once. I think it was his third year, and I believe they can get back there. So even though it's changed, it's not over for them, in my opinion.
Coach Jerry DiNardo joining us to talk about his coach who passed away earlier today. Many, many thanks. Always great to catch up.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
We are delighted to welcome Coach Matt Luke to the program. He is the interim coach. Coach, thank you very much for making the time. I can only imagine what your life has been like lately.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me, man. Excited to be on.
I know this has come up. You held a press conference and talked about all these things, but I would like to go back just for a moment. 2 weeks ago, you were Coach Freese's assistant. You've been under him for a number of years. How did you find out that your life was about to change?
Ross Bjork called me to his office on a Thursday about 4 o'clock, and he told me he was going to make a change and asked me if I was ready to lead the program, and I told him I was.
And following off that, I mean, things move quickly, and I know you obviously had great feelings for Coach Freese, as everyone in Oxford did. Have you been able to talk to him since then?
We had a brief conversation. It was not a long conversation, but the gist of it was he was just telling me to be myself, and that was he was just trying to give me that advice to be myself.
Coach, you have new coordinators. I mean, this is your staff now. A lot of new personnel on that coaching staff, and this is obviously a new adventure for you. Take us through your own process. You've been thinking about this now for 2 weeks. Practice is here. Give us the lay of the land.
Well, it starts with the coordinators, and just so excited about Phil Longo. I had the chance to work with him right alongside with him in the spring, and just really impressed with his talent. He's got a great grasp of his offense. He does a great job spreading the field, and he's going to have some weapons to work with. Shea and all the young receivers, and the line coming back, Jordan Wilkins coming back. I'm excited to see his offense with all the weapons. And then you move on to defense. I thought Coach McGriff did an awesome job of just having energy, and he kept it simple where the kids know what to do and they play hard. So I'm really excited about that combination. And I was able to make one hire with Jack Bicknell Jr. And that was an important hire for me just because he was coming over and taking over my room in the O-line. And I felt that was a huge hire. So now we have 3 guys on our staff with head coaching experience, with Coach Pivito, Coach Longo, and Coach Bicknell. And and obviously him having all the NFL experience is something he can bring to the table in that room too.
Coach, this is your school. Family ties are deep. No one would ever doubt your passion for Ole Miss. Talk a little bit about relating the relatability to the team, because this is critical. These young men have been through a tough time just like everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with me being the assistant head coach, the last 3 or 4 years, I've been in front of them. I have a comfort level with them. I've spoke with them. So I think they have a comfort level with me. And, I just really want to make sure I put the focus back on them. They've been through so much adversity. And, I think they just want to go out and play football. So that's my job, and the staff's job is just to, hey, let's keep the focus on the players and let's go play football.
I know you have much more important things to be concerned about than what happens after Thanksgiving, but you will be asked this question. You will be measured. Programs across the country, analysts will be talking about you in terms of getting this job. Number one, I'm assuming you want to be the head football coach on a full-time basis at Ole Miss?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a job that I've been preparing my whole life for. I've been coaching now 18 years under great head coaches. Phil Fulmer, David Cutcliffe, Mike McIntyre. I've been around a lot of great coaches, and 14 years of my career playing or coaching has been at Ole Miss, and so I feel like this is a job that I've been preparing for, and I want to take full advantage of this opportunity.
Has Ross or anyone else given you an indicator? Listen, if you do this, it will be yours.
No indicator as far as a number of games or anything like that, but obviously that I have a good, if not better, chance than anybody else, because I'm doing a on-the-job interview, so to speak, and I'm excited about this opportunity and really looking forward to it.
I believe it was your dad who made some comment about what. Yeah, we like those kind of comments, Coach.
Yeah, we got to get my dad some media training, but he's really excited, and you could tell by the look in his face, and it's well documented with him and my brother both being players here, and both those guys were my heroes and wanted to be just like them growing up. But now to have us all here together, it's really, really special.
So as this thing develops, I mean, there are 12 games, and I don't think anyone really knows. But there are precedents, and because you coach in the same division. But Ed Orgeron took over last year at the end of September. He got the job. Do you take anything from what he did and how he was able to embrace that team, and how much those young men liked him and ultimately loved him?
Sure, I had the year. I worked under Coach Orgeron 1 year here at Ole Miss, so obviously, I have a lot of respect for him and what he was able to do. But I think with me, I have to take it one day at a time, one practice at a time, one game at a time, and really focus on this team and getting this team ready to play on September 2nd. I think if I do anything besides that, I think we're getting too far ahead of ourselves. We just we got to get this team ready to play on September 2nd, and that's what I'm looking to do. Coach,
as you know, one of the tough responsibilities of being a head coach is dealing with discipline, and you've been faced with it pretty quickly too. Your players getting in trouble. Can you address that, and what are you or have you done?
Yeah, I got the information last night. We got all the facts. We visited with the players and their parents this morning. And and I met with the team today, and we made the decision to suspend them for the first game, and also they got to do some community service, but they're still going to be practicing with them. They made some mistakes, but when you cross a line, there's got to be some accountability for your actions. But we're going to move forward from it, and they'll be practicing with us, but we are going to suspend them for the first game.
Having so many people in your family and mentors like you referred to earlier to perhaps lean on. I realize you don't have a lot of time, but how are you thinking and compartmentalizing and dealing with everything in front of you as you get close to that first game?
I think that's the biggest challenge is all the distractions and the outside noise. I think the thing I have to do is I have to be myself. I have to take from all the coaches that I've been around and all the great things that I've learned, but then have my own spin on it, and I have to be myself. I can't go out there and try to be somebody I'm not. I got to go be Matt Luke, and obviously take all the things that I've learned and then put my own stamp on the program. And that's been the biggest advice I've gotten from everybody is, hey Matt, just go be yourself. It's going to be good enough.
I imagine your family's pretty excited too.
No question.
Coach, we'll let you get back to work. Thanks for making time.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Thank you.
You bet.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Put a little cherry on the top.
Tim Tebow and the star of the hour, the Marty Party. Marty Smith, his program debuting tonight on ESPN2. Okay, Timmy, before we get to Marty, and I do want to catch up with you because we have not heard a lot from you. Just give us an update. I know you're on fire right now playing baseball. What's it been like?
I'm just having a good time. I'm enjoying it. You know how much I love competing, Paul, and I'm loving it every day. And today was actually my first off day in like a couple months, and I spent it.
And we showed up.
Yeah.
In his house.
They showed up, took over the whole house. Good thing it's a rental, Paul.
Yeah, no, it didn't look like your main mansion. Not that I've ever been there.
Oh, stop it.
Well, Marty, let's incorporate you into this conversation since it's your show tonight. Give us the backstory on how this came. I mean, we've all seen your reports over the years, but it finally came together. So tell us how it happened.
Just really fortunate. I think it really all began last year when Jonathan Wiley, my producer, and I went over to Iceland. The Icelandic soccer team had a crazy run through Euros, that Euro tournament, and the bosses called and they said, hey, we want you two idiots to get on an airplane and go over to Iceland and produce some content. So we get on a plane. We don't have much of a plan. Jonathan put a plan together on the plane, and we land and hit the ground running. And in one day, basically, we had, the president of the country. We had the biggest band in the country. We had the biggest MMA star in the country, who was Conor McGregor's boy and training partner, choked me out. So we did some really interesting content over there. And that made some people pay attention. And then we went into our college football work, doing Inside the Program. We loved that. And then, of course, we went to Rome with the University of Michigan and Coach Harbaugh. And we got back from there. And that's kind of when the conversation started. But it wasn't until a month ago that we really got a green light on this. And they said, hey, go make us a television show. So we've been all over creation, man. We went to China to interview Cristiano Ronaldo. We stayed in Charlotte for a little while to hang out with Cam Newton. We went down to Miami to interview Maverick Carter, LeBron James's guy. And then we went out to L.A.
Let's just be honest about something, though. Marty Smith's America started in Iceland,
yes,
in Rome,
yes,
in China.
Yes.
So why the name?
Because we are diplomats.
I see how it works.
Son, we are U.S. diplomats. We are spreading the eagle blood and the stars and stripes all over the world, baby.
I definitely get it. I see how it all fits.
Tim, that's a really good point, by the way. Shouldn't it be Marty Smith's world?
That's why they pay
I
you
love America,
a lot of
Paul
money.
Finebaum. Don't forget it.
Okay.
He said okay.
I mean, Marty, you've come a long way from throwing balls to Tebow and Spears on Saturday morning for SportsCenter. I mean, this is. I mean, everywhere I go, I'm reading about you, and I'm not just saying this, but this has to be a really cool experience for you personally.
Beyond, first of all, to be a kid from a farm in Southwest Virginia, to even have a job at ESPN in the first place is beyond my dreams. And then to be able to transition from a single sport reporter when I covered NASCAR for so long to have the opportunity to cover college football, and then to transition into covering everything. And now they've believed in what Jonathan and our team from Crown Town Films and the boys, what we're doing, enough to say, we don't know what the hell y'all are, but we like it, so go try it. And
do they talk with that form of an accent?
No, I think I'm the only one that has that form of an accent. That's another part of this, though, quite honestly. To be a Southern boy and to be so proud to be from the South, it's awesome to have a voice like this and a platform like this when there's just not a whole lot of Southern boys on the TV.
Yeah, I do
on
want
the TV.
I want to say something. These guys never get, and ladies never get enough credit. But you mentioned Jonathan Wiley, who I've worked with many times, and he's the man. He's one of the great producers.
He's right here. He's behind
in
the
camera.
business.
So
show up on TV.
I'm glad that he is getting some credit here because
for those of you on TV, that was him.
He's having to work while this is going on. Tim, let's talk about you for a moment. I know you don't like talking about yourself, but give us your what is the schedule the rest of the summer for you?
Just continuing to play every single day. I think till the end of the season we don't have any more off days, so it'll be every day, the grind of baseball. But I'm enjoying it. Still trying to improve every day. Still getting used to it, honestly, of the transition from playing one sport my whole life, giving up baseball, coming back 12 years later. So still feel like there's so much more for me to improve on, but I'm loving the competition every night.
And the season ends for you in early September, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Paul, let me tell you a story. So we get over here to Tim's rental home, all right? And we're starting to set up for the show here. There's all kind of equipment everywhere. And we don't have a grill. We really wanted to have a grill for the show, all right? So who does Tim contact but his neighbor down the street? What, 2 or 3 doors, 3 or 4 doors, something like that? Tell him who your neighbor is.
Is David Wright.
Oh, it's only David Wright. I mean, David Wright has a grill, and he brings the grill over, and then he stops and hangs out for a little while.
Are you mad that I didn't have a grill?
I'm not mad you didn't have a grill. I just
think
think
it's... Is that the problem, Marty?
No, it's not a problem. Well, you're a Southern boy, you're supposed to have a grill. Even if it's not your house, you should have demanded of your landlord to have a grill.
So Marty,
he can't help but use his hands.
You know Tebow's a carnivorous type. You know he's gnawing on them steaks every night.
So explain to the world, Marty, what role Tim Tebow will play on this program.
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Felt like,
I don't know if it is a role.
So Jonathan and I felt like it was really, really important that we have a live presence on the show. We have those 4 pre-produced pieces that I told you about, but we're at our best when we're live. And we felt like it was really important to have that presence for 2 reasons. 1, it's really fun, but 2, because I'll try to explain this for people that don't care or know about television. All right, I wanted our pieces with these athletes to be the best version of themselves. Now, if the best version of that piece with Cam Newton is 7.5 minutes long, we don't want to have to stretch it to 9 minutes just to fit a time increment. It's an hour-long show. So we can make that piece 7.5 minutes, and then we can spend time with Tim live busting his chops about his shirt being too tight or whatever. That's a tight shirt, bro.
You're going to go there?
Yeah, man, that's a tight shirt. So that was really important to us. And we're really fortunate that the one day off he had all summer was today, the day we debuted.
So you good with this, Tim?
Honestly, I just kind of hung in the back and cheered for Marty. He likes that. Fanfare, celebrate, clap for him. Woo, good job, Marty. That's kind of what I did.
So, Marty, one more time tonight. It's just a minor excursion. You go to China. You go to Cam Newton training camp. You're with Tim Tebow. Yep. I do want to ask you, because Tim has obviously been all over the world doing great work, great missionary work. What was the experience like to go to China?
Amazing. Again, growing up in the middle of nowhere, you never dream you're going to have these opportunities. And especially when the opportunity is not just to see that beautiful country and its beautiful people, but to do it as your job and with the most famous athlete on the planet, besides Tebow.
Stop.
So I will say about China, the people were so gracious. They were so kind and very inquisitive. We were talking about Jonathan earlier. I'm pretty sure he took about 15 or 20 selfies because they thought he was a pro basketball player. They were wrong.
How many did you take?
No, I'm serious.
How many did you take?
A lot. If you went over there, man, you would be able to move 10 feet.
He liked it.
About selfies, let me just say this one last thing. If you want to feel inadequate, take a photograph with Cristiano Ronaldo. Because that is a pretty son of a gun right there. And he will make you feel real inadequate real fast, Paul.
Well, Marty, I spend every Saturday morning with Tim Tebow, so I feel pretty inadequate on a regular basis.
You know how I feel right now, Jack.
First of all, Paul, you know this. This is probably a fact. There are more people that chant P-Town or Paul Finebaum than anybody else.
Hey, Paul.
They love you, Paul. It should be Paul Finebaum's America.
Seriously, I mean, you want to talk about running for president, man? You could easily
Or
win
at
governor
least
of Alabama.
Easy.
I mean,
no
easy.
problem. You don't even have
Phyllis
to
could
really
be your campaign manager. Saban will run the treasury. Dude, you got it.
I really like this job better. But anyway, hey, guy, Tim, I know you have to go to work out. Those biceps are looking a little small. So hopefully, Tim, we will see you soon. Good luck the rest of the summer. Marty, the Marty
Thanks,
party
Paul.
tonight. Thanks, guys, at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. Marty Smith, not the Marty Party, but Marty Smith.
Marty Smarty.
America. And next, he'll conquer the world.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Glad you're with us, and let's get right to a headline before we talk to Ron Higgins, offensive lineman Maya Tuhuma, indefinitely suspended. This is according to Ed Orgeron. Ron Higgins from NOLA.com, always great. He may not be allowed in practice, but he is allowed on this program. Welcome, Ron. Good afternoon to you. You should give it an award for being able to not only spell but pronounce that young man's name.
Yeah, Maya Tahuma. This kind of really hurts they didn't have a lot of depth on the offensive line to start with, and this certainly didn't help them.
So what's it all about?
Well, I mean, as far as we know, it was academic stuff. It started out as academic stuff, and maybe it's still academic stuff. I mean, Maya has never been gotten in a bunch of trouble here. Never been a bad kid. So that's why, I mean, I think he'll probably be back. Just don't know when he'll be back. But he's working through academic stuff as far as we know. But then again, we thought Arden Key just took a leave of absence and he ended up having shoulder surgery. So what do we know?
Yeah, and listen, I don't want to make too much out of it because nothing upsets fans more than media crybabies. But this has been a hot button issue since the other day when it came out that the school was not letting you scribes in and others to practice. You've seen it all, Ron. Help explain this in normal lay language. What's all this about?
Well, what it's about, first of all, from a media standpoint, when we're allowed in for 15 minutes, we don't see any plays or anything. We see basically drills. So we just couldn't quite understand why we're being shut out, because that's what we'd see. You see drills, and you take a roster and you count who's there and who's not. But at least Ed Orgeron explained and was apologetic, as he explained, that he wanted to totally close practice until August 21st, the first day of classes. And he said he might open it sooner because he wanted to finish installing the brand-new offense they had, which is totally different than what Les Miles had. And there's a lot of new defensive players. He's moving all over the place. And he just felt he had to have total privacy to do that. And I'll give Ed credit. At least he explained what he was doing and why he was doing it, and really apologized for it. And then said, if we get installed quicker, we'll let you in quicker. But that's the way he wanted it right now. I had no problem with that, but I didn't understand why. Before basically we were allowed in the first 15 minutes of practice anyway, which is, like I said, you don't see anything. But Ed wanted it that way, and at least he explained it where the previous coach never explained anything. So I'll give him that.
Speaking of the previous coach, his name continues to be, we're talking about Les Miles, continues to be associated with jobs, Ole Miss now, which is open. It came out yesterday or the day before that he tried out to be a commentator at Fox and didn't get the job. We all know he was on ESPN on National Signing Day. I don't know whether conversations occurred. Not that he was easy to cover when you could talk to him, but what's going on with this guy?
Well, I just think he's kind of trying to find something he can do. I mean, a niche. I mean, personally, I think Les should probably maybe go back to the pros as an assistant or a scout. That's not insulting to him. I think I agree with you about the Ole Miss thing. That's so far out of whack, it's hard to believe. I think Ole Miss will go back to somebody, say not like a Hugh Freeze, but in that age range, in that type of offense he runs. I think that's who they'll look at in that. And as far as the TV stuff, Les cannot speak in sound bites. We know that. And on TV, you have to speak in sound bites. I mean, I remember talking to Tim Brando, virtual host of ESPN Game Day, and when they were auditioning for the spot Corso has now, it was Lee Corso and Pepper Rogers. And Tim said basically Pepper was a great storyteller, but cannot speak in sound bites, and Lee Corso could. And as we know, Les can't speak in sound bites. Sometimes we don't know where Les was going with it. So it's understandable why Fox kind of said, we'll pass on you, and then ESPN has been interested. I mean, it's not saying Les is a bad guy. It just doesn't fit him.
Yeah, I mean, and where I work, not that this is breaking news, but Gene Chizik is now working here again. He was working here a couple of years ago, came back here after his 2-year tenure. And I'm not comparing one versus the other. They both have national championships on their resume, but Miles coached last year.
Right. It's just, for TV's sake, you have to speak and sound bites. Yeah. You have to get your point across. You're the business. You understand this, and there are some coaches who can do that and explain it, clear for the general public, and some who can't. And honestly, I mean, Les, you talked to him all the time last year. I mean, in past years, and a lot of times we don't know where he was going with what he was saying.
Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, you just didn't know where he was going. As far as the coaching thing, I think the fact that he was fired because he refused to, run a modern, updated offense has hurt him. And no matter how many times he said he's going to change his style, he's going to, run what everybody else runs, a little more of a spread, a little more spread option. I think the fact that he basically ignored what Joe Oliva wanted him to do, the AD, and went his own way, I think that it really hurt him. And I think the general public, when they think of Les Miles, you think of that I formation cloud of dust offense, and it's hard to sell to your fan base. No matter if you have a national championship ring or not, it's hard to sell to your fan base.
Chatting with Ron Higgins. Ron, I know predictions are just that. But now that we're a little closer to the season, we've talked to you at various intervals about your expectations. We don't know a whole lot more than we did at media days or before that, but you know this program inside and out. What do you think?
Well, right now they're the best team I've never seen. I can tell you that. I'm going to say probably no worse than 8-4, and if they got really lucky, 10-2, but somewhere in between there, 9-3, 8-4. It's just, and just the question marks right now. I'm not going to question Danny Elling as much as other people are. He's healthy. His back is repaired. He's throwing the ball really well. What the receivers say, they say that this is the Elling that came in 2 years ago from Purdue, had a great arm. The only thing I question LSU right now more is their offensive line depth and their schedule. They have to play 5 SEC road games in some very tough places. And how quickly can they, run Matt Canada's offense smoothly, which has a lot of shifts and a lot of formations and a lot of motions. So I'm going to say no worse than 8-4 and a high end of 10-2 if everything, worked out perfectly.
The LSU fan base, they're pretty rabid and they're always shooting for the stars. Is it just my imagination, or is it just the reality of perception, I guess, that maybe the expectations are down or have been dialed down just a notch this year?
I think so, yeah. I think they understand they've got a new coach and they have a new offensive system, completely new offensive system. And they lost to they always lose a lot of guys in the NFL. They lost 2 first-round draft choices out of the secondary. Lost Fournette, but they got a great guy to replace him in Geis. I think they understand this program's kind of right now a bit of a transition. They're transitioning to a new offense, and they got a a bunch of young quarterbacks behind Etling, and I think they understand the schedule. I mean, the 5th game on the road after the Florida debacle last year. I mean, I think they get that, so they understand. You know, they dial it down a bit. You know, that said, you know, they always think that somehow, some way, that the chips fell their way, they would, you know, get to Atlanta. But you know, as long as Nick Saban's breathing, you've got to go through Nick Saban to get to Atlanta.
So just breathing. That's the stipulation.
Long as you stand out there on the sideline, looking at you, you know, just and glaring at somebody, or just that's just the team to beat. That's just the way it is. I mean, the way he has it going, the way he recruits, the way his whole thing is set up is still ahead of everybody else, and everybody else is still trying to catch him. And one of these years he's going to have an off year, which means 2 losses. Heavens forbid.
Yeah.
You know, the rest of the league would love to.
And you know, on that subject, for that to happen, it almost takes something superhuman elsewhere. In Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel, or something like that. And I don't know if we have that or not yet, but that's usually what happens.
You know, and really, when they lose, it just helps them. It just makes them angry. You know, it refocuses them. I mean, honestly, look at they lost Ole Miss a few years ago. I mean, and they came back and won the rest. I mean, they really know how to react. He knows how to react and get his team, you know, back after.
And on that subject, I want to get my final question, Ron. You mentioned Ole Miss, which is a big rival of LSU. Everyone knows that. It's been 2 weeks now, but what is the view there of that Ole Miss program now without Hugh Freeze and obviously heading toward Judgment Day with the NCAA?
I think it's kind of like an us against the world mentality, and he just kind of, we're going to bow up and we're going to go out and play our football. There's nothing we can't control the NCAA or the probation. We just got to control what's in front of us. You know, Ole Miss could be a real player this year in the SEC race, not because they're eligible, it's because they could ruin a lot of people's seasons. It reminds me a long, long time ago when Memphis State was ineligible for the Metro Conference title, and they ended up winning the Metro tournament over Louisville, and Louisville was like couldn't get an invite that year, and they were up in arms. It's kind of like this way. I mean, if Ole Miss beats some key people along the way in the Western Division race, they'll throw stuff out of whack, and they can't even go anywhere. And I think Ole Miss will play hard, and I think they'll band together this year. And you know, as far as they're concerned, like all the other stuff that's going on around them, and it's just like we have nothing to do with that. We're just trying to play football.
Ron Higgins, always great to catch you up. Sports columnist at NOAA.com. Ron, we'll talk to you soon. Be well.
All right, Paul. Take care. We'll see you.
You got it. Great stuff.
Thank you for listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast. The Paul Finebaum Show airs weekdays on the SEC Network, beginning at 3 Eastern.